Can't get too close.
Yeah, everything's very sensitive speaker-wise in here, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah, thank you, Alex and Olga, for this lovely venue that they found for us. It's it's good.
Please put up your hands, Alex and Olga.
Here they are. So they've been helping us out.
That's Alex and Olga. The reason why we're in Austria is actually because of Alex and Olga.
Yes.
They invited us, and so we came. Yeah. Yeah. So we've just come from Belgium. Actually, last week we did a seminar in Belgium.
Some of you were there.
Some of you were there. Yeah. Those of you who were there, it went all right, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Aside from maybe a few challenging moments. Yeah. No, Mary and I are in the. Well, this is just the beginning of we're going around the world, I suppose you could say, which we are actually doing. Started in Australia just a few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Arrived in Belgium. We were very, very tired in Belgium and very spirit attacked in Belgium, so badly so that I didn't get sleep for nearly 7 days. So it took a bit to sort that out in terms of had to process a bit emotionally to get them off my back, which I've managed to do now to a degree. And generally it was pretty uncomfortable our first week.
It was.
In Belgium. Yeah. And so we were looking like we were going to have to cancel Belgium altogether based on how badly things were going for us. But we managed to work through some things emotionally, and the spirit sort of backed off of us, which was good. And so, by the time we come to doing the Belgium actual seminar, both of us just had a bit of a snotty nose. And that's about, snotty means, I don't know how to say it in German. Congested nose.
You can tell us in German.
Yeah. Whatever that is. Yeah. It was pretty tough lead up to our first seminar, and Mary and I have been spirit attacked for probably since 2 to 3 weeks before we left. And so it's been pretty hard going for us, so we had to get a fair bit of rest, and we're still needing a bit of rest. I haven't caught up on my sleep yet, so yeah. But
it's marginally more peaceful here in Austria, where we're staying.
We're staying up at, is it Stubaital?
Stubaital. Got to get the link.
Very pretty. Yeah. But there's an excavator excavating. He starts at 7 in the morning, every morning. So.
But we're usually awake by then, so it's okay. Yeah.
It was better than Belgium because Belgium, the church bells started ringing at 6 every morning. And they went to 10 o'clock at night as well. So that was like, for us, we live in the bush in Australia, so it's very quiet at night. And Mary and I normally go to sleep about 8 o'clock at night. And I normally wake up at daybreak, so 4 o'clock or 4:30 here. And so people starting work at 7 or 6 with an excavator near our window, it's not so bad. It's just more how late it goes at night as to how much sleep we end up getting.
Yeah. We're catching up.
So
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting to have you all here, hey? Who's just from Austria? Austrians? Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Have you met each other?
You all know each other?
No, don't know. No. So you have to catch up, eh?
Yeah.
We know each other, but just from SMS.
Oh, okay.
You didn't meet
from tech.
Yeah.
From tech. Yeah. Not really.
So only 6. We're in Austria, and only 6 of 43 of you are from Austria.
Yeah. So Germany, the Germans.
Living, right? Not like.
Yeah, where
living
you live.
in,
where you
living in, yes.
So the Germans are,
so
the majority,
quite a number of you. Yes. Have many of you met each other? Or,
yeah.
No? There you go.
Meet each other.
Probably each session we just say, put up your hand again so you can see who is.
Yeah.
Now, other countries, we've got Hungary, I think, is one country, yes?
Yes. Hello, the brothers.
Hungarians.
Is it? Yeah, you can tell they're brothers now that I look, yeah.
So,
good to have you
welcome.
guys, yeah.
Serbia?
Yes.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
Willkommen.
I don't know.
How do you say it in Serbian? Welcome.
Welcome.
Dobrodošli.
Dobrodošli. Dobrodošli. Oh, it's good. I like all
There you go.
of that. Yeah.
France. Have we got some French?
Yes,
couple
you're
of
and
French.
Nicholas.
Yeah, so too.
Yeah.
This is coming from Switzerland. There'll be. Was
No.
anyone coming from Switzerland? Oh no,
They're coming.
two. Yeah,
That's
they'll
right,
be,
they're
they'll be
just
a little
coming a
late.
bit late,
Yeah, they'll be late.
Croatia, we have. Yeah.
Croatia.
Yeah.
Yes, they're two from Croatia.
Greece.
Greece.
No, where are you? Yeah.
Are you
Nico.
still from Greece, Nicholas?
Where?
Or you're still on a ship?
Yeah. Yeah.
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you a ship master now, or you? No.
No.
Not anymore.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Italy.
Italy.
Italy. Yes.
Yes. So we got
3 from Italy.
3 from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or is it Italy or Hong Kong? Do we say? Yeah. Both.
Both, really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Both. Half.
You go
and
back
half.
and forth still, don't you?
Yeah.
Both of you. Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Where did we miss? Portugal.
Portugal.
1, 2, 3.
3 from.
Yeah. You guys all know each other. Yeah.
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 We'll see you in Portugal.
Yes.
Good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you're all sitting apart, because you used to live in one house together. Now you're like, oh, give me the space. Yeah.
Get some break. Bit of
It's
break.
true.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did we miss? Who?
Poland.
Poland. Oh,
Poland.
welcome.
So 3 from Poland.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I wanted to come to Poland to the Bears. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
We were.
And where are you from, Sven?
England, but I live in Germany.
Okay. Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. And who
And
have we
Sweden.
missed? Sweden.
Yes.
Sweden. Yes.
Daniela and Johnny.
Swedish. There you
Yeah.
go.
England.
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 Yes. So
Elsa and Emma. Yep.
Elsa and Emma.
Yeah.
And who else is missing?
Who did we miss?
Who did we miss?
Oh, it's nearly everyone.
No.
Yeah.
Yep. Good day. There you go.
Nice.
You're all earthlings,
Yeah.
but not really. Hey, it's not really earthlings.
Yeah. Souling.
Soulings. Soulings. Yeah. All human souls
Yeah.
coming from far away to this earth
Yeah.
to have your first experience of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
The experience of life here isn't that good, though, is it? I've noticed. On the whole. Yeah. We'll talk about that a bit.
Yeah.
Some
Just
practical
Yeah,
things.
practical things. If we just use the rear exits, just be careful of the technology all around you.
Yeah.
It's fairly out of your way, but just be careful not to bump it and so on.
Yeah.
Does everyone know where the toilets are, the bathrooms? Yep. So if you go, if you come out of this room and head towards reception, it's on your right and down a set of stairs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right next to the reception entry, really.
Yeah. If you head towards reception, you'll just see it there.
Yeah.
That's the set of... they said if you do want to purchase any food or drinks, there's a bar and a cafe here in the hotel. So when we have breaks, there's always someone around. If there's no one serving, just press the bell. We'll have some breaks during the day, probably one main break in the middle if you want to have something to eat. Yep.
Around 1 o'clock, probably.
Yeah. My...
Yes, we will do bathroom breaks. I didn't get enough of them in Belgium myself, so and I'd like to drink more water. We didn't get a chance to drink a lot of water either in Belgium either. Mind you, a lot of that was because the water wasn't very good. But
there's better water now.
There's better water now. So.
Yeah, so probably every hour and a half we'll have a bathroom break. But if you do need to slip out, that's no problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a donation box?
Yes.
We do. At the
we do.
back, in the red box there, at the back, yeah. Thanks for reminding us.
We keep forgetting.
Yes, getting ourselves.
Yes.
Bring it on. Yeah. No, we're in Europe, obviously, and we'll be in Portugal next, so Euro still.
Euros preferable.
Yeah. Then we're going to...
For the moment, yeah.
Britain, so...
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then we're going to Canada and the US.
And also, if you'd rather donate online, you can. I should write it down. Actually, I forgot to do that in Belgium as well. It's just donate.divinetruth.com, and that should get you to our donation page. And on there you can donate by credit card, by TransferWise, which is a really good thing we've been using a lot because of the travel, and also bank or other methods as well. So, yep.
And we should say thank you to all of you who've already donated.
Yes,
Thank you
without
very
your
much.
donations we actually wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Setting up the event was quite a lot of effort for us. We had to buy a whole new setup of tech because our old setup of tech was no longer licensed to operate in Europe or in the USA anymore. Because the people had changed all the frequencies of things over the last few years with TV and radio, digital TV and radio, where our old equipment was no longer licensed for here. We could only use it in Australia. So obviously we had to then buy a whole heap of new equipment and then learn how to use it as well and put it in bags as well and so forth. So that took quite a long time, and we had to get a lot of it. We couldn't buy a lot of it in Australia because it's not our frequency. So we had to buy it from the US or Europe. And so it took months and months and months for us to do all of that. And then on top of that, a lot of our venues took a long time to organise as well.
They did.
Mary started off wanting to do living room, but then we looked at a photo of Alex's living room and go, 10 people are probably going to fit there.
And a lot more of you wanted to come.
And a lot more of you wanted to come.
Yeah.
So we had to start looking for venues, and in different countries that's quite difficult. And of course, a lot of the places don't want Jesus and Mary to come to their venues. So it ends up that on the average, we have to look through 50 venues to find one that suits us, or one that they'll let us use. And in Belgium, it was close to 100 venues we had to find.
Austria wasn't too bad.
Austria wasn't too bad. It was less than that. It was far less than that.
2 or 3.
2 or 3, yeah. And that was good. But other countries, just depends on how difficult they find the whole concept of Jesus and Mary coming to visit, as to how much they let us use their venues. Yeah. And a lot of venues are also not that suitable because you want a bit of aircon generally, mostly not for you because it doesn't matter for you. But that's a joke though. For the equipment, no, it's not like that either. But obviously you don't want everything to get so hot that all of you are so uncomfortable that you can barely concentrate. And also you want soft seats, don't you? You don't want to sit for 4 hours on a hard seat. Trust me, we've had some venues like that. It's very uncomfortable. So in every place we go, we try to organise things to be as comfortable as possible for you. Yeah. And so that takes a bit of time. So we started organising it in January this year. And we're now in July and we're here. So that's how long it's taken. So we're very happy to be here and meet many of you for the first time. Sometimes we see your emails pass through the office and things like that, and we wonder who's that person in Hungary, or who's that person in Croatia, or who's that person in Germany, or whatever. And because many of you we've never met before, and so we're very pleased to meet you for the first time.
And it's lovely to see people that I haven't seen for 10 years or more. Yeah, some of you. So it's really nice.
Yeah.
Nice to hug you. Yeah.
And there's something unique about all of you, and that is that you're actually interested in truth. Yeah? That's a unique thing. I don't know how you find it in your personal lives, but it's pretty hard to find people interested in truth, isn't it, on earth? Everyone's so embroiled in their day-to-day activities, their day-to-day life. There's a lot of detunement from the concept of God, from the concept of there being life after earth. And so people are so focused on living their life here, very little focus on what's going to happen in their future, and very little interest in the subject for the most part. And even those people who are quite religious or say they're quite religious really don't have a very strong desire for truth either. I don't know if you've found that, but that's what I've generally found. So it's interesting that you, as a group of people, some of the few people obviously that are at the moment interested in God's truth, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And it's something that we'd like to share more of with you over the next 3 days. So we should probably mention what we're going to do over the next 3 days with him. Today, we want to have a discussion with you today about God, God's personality and nature, and we want to focus on a few specific things about God and his personality and how it's expressed through his laws. So that's sort of what we'd like to focus a bit on today. Tomorrow, we would like to talk about how you want to break those laws.
And how that's going.
And how that's going for you. Is breaking the law working well in your life? So we want to talk about that, and in that process we'll not only look at ways that you might be obvious to you that you're breaking the law, but also ways maybe that it's not so obvious, where you're breaking the law and therefore receiving a penalty for breaking the law without really understanding why. And so we'd like to talk about those things tomorrow. And we may even get onto that subject a bit today, depending on how we go. And then on Sunday, we're thinking of doing a number of different things with you. Firstly, we're thinking that we'll open the group up to some just general questions that you would like to specifically ask questions about. But also we were thinking we might open it up to some spirits to ask some questions as well. So that way we can help some spirits while we're here as well as help yourselves. Every place we go to, there's obviously many spirits from your history that either come along with you to an event to listen, or spirits that are already here in this area. In Austria, now we're in Austria, that have never heard divine truth either, even in the spirit world. So it gives us an opportunity to have that first discussion with them, and also hopefully allow them to talk to some of our spirit friends so that they can progress as well.
Because they're still quite interested in the earth, sometimes this is the best place for them to start hearing about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we also find that every country has its own emotional injuries. And because you're a collective of countries, obviously all coming from Europe in some way or another, as the rest of the world sees you, obviously some of your emotional injuries are going to be different to others who are here. And so this gives us an opportunity to talk with you too, and also on Sunday for you to be open about what things you're facing and what questions you have about that, and how does that relate to God's truth as well. So we'd encourage you to do that on Sunday, but also all the way through the group. We're not going to have a lot of time to spend with you personally, because obviously Mary and I are talking for 4 or 5 hours. We are starting our day. Usually we're here at tomorrow it would be a bit later, but today we're here just we had to leave home at 8 o'clock, and for the most part we go home. We have to unload all of our audio in preparation for the next day, which usually takes an hour or so, and then we have dinner and go to bed. Basically and then we get up the next day and we do the same. So not a lot of time to spend with you during the next 3 days, but Mary and I are staying longer this time. So in Brussels what we did was we stayed. We had a period of time. We knew we'd probably get some heavy spirit attack when we arrived in Brussels because of some of the spirits we knew who were using that opportunity. So we had to allow some time at the beginning of before we held an event to just recover from that. And then at the event, we met all these people, but we didn't have much chance to get to know them because after the event we left pretty much the day after. And in this case, any of you who are sticking around for a few days, we might get the opportunity to catch up with you more informally. And even if it means sort of even hiring a hall here for another day or something next week, which we might be able to do. So it just depends how many of you are here. And if it's 10 people, then we'll probably meet in somebody's house or something like that. But if it's not, and there's 20 or so sticking around, then we might come back here in a smaller room or something like that and have a chat. So we get to know you a bit better
See how you feel by Sunday.
See how you feel by Sunday. By Sunday, usually by Saturday, everyone's a bit saturated, is what you find. And Sunday is often a blur for most for most people. Yeah.
Can I ask who felt a bit nervous coming this morning?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have this really that's great that you can feel that, and that's just fear, isn't it? But often what I'm sensing is that there's just quite an opportunity for you guys here, and often I get nervous when there's an opportunity coming up. There's a chance for change. There's something new about to happen. So I just encourage you all to embrace the opportunity of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Key is to relax a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, mics from now on.
Yep.
Let's use the mic. So,
Nico,
if we
just
have
behind
someone,
you, Jorn.
Yep. Jorn,
Yep.
you just
My fear is about losing the control of my life.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because when I open to divine,
To God, yeah.
I have to respond divine. My law of attraction changes, and I don't
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need control.
Yeah.
So,
But Nicholas, last time I saw you, you said you don't like it then as well.
actually, I have a debate with God regarding that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and this is something we'd like to talk about tomorrow a lot. Many of you are in a state of debate with God. Yeah, it's like that song, I fought the law and the law won. that song. Most of you are in a state of fighting the law and therefore really fighting God. And that's not very good for you, but also it's important to work through the reasons why. Yep. So that's something we want to talk about during this group, actually.
Yeah. But I feel like your spirit guides are pretty excited about you being here. That's
Yeah.
the buzz, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Gives them more chance to help you in your life, right? Yeah.
Inspire you.
Yeah.
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 All right. Is there any questions you'd like to ask
About the proceedings, maybe.
proceedings before we proceed?
Yeah.
No, you're all good.
Charlotte?
Fair.
If there's an opportunity of an informal meeting, I would have to book an apartment or something.
You'd have to change your bookings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when will you decide on what day it will happen?
It would most likely be Wednesday if we did it. Mary and I will need a rest of a day at least after the event.
And on Tuesday, I want to go to the Alps. I want to go up and up. Yep.
We think the Tuesday might still be a fine day, and we want an opportunity to do a walk up at one of the
It's a sunny day.
mountains up there.
And then
some of
Wednesday.
you might want to join us actually if you're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But we'll hopefully decide by
Probably Saturday afternoon.
evening. Yeah,
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just next to you there, you
Do you know how long it will take on Sunday? Just like
We're
how long?
hoping-
how long it?
Yeah, we're hoping to start early Sunday with you guys. So instead of starting at 11 as we had advertised, we're hoping we might be able to start at 10 or even a bit earlier and finish earlier, if that's all right with you. Because we do need to pack up and everything, the venue on Sunday. So is that, if we start earlier, is that going to affect anyone negatively on Sunday?
If you are leaving Sunday evening.
Yeah, it'll probably help you
gives
if you are leaving
yeah,
Sunday later.
Yeah.
And we're thinking possibly be done by 2:30 in the afternoon on Sunday. Yeah.
How we can be of service, how we can help you in the morning, packing and unpacking and stuff like that. If there is some time that we can come earlier, help you pack up and go drink a coffee or do whatever, and you don't have all the strain.
Yeah. We need to be pretty independent with our packing because it's you should see the way Jesus has designed these packing cases.
It's
There's
a
a lot.
3D,
It's a 3D spatial
Yeah.
situation.
And it took me for 4 days to work out how to pack the cases. They're all foamed and they had to all be cut and everything else.
Yeah.
And Mary and I, because we're the only persons that are going to be at every event, we have to know how to set up and dismantle, and we have to know where everything is. So when it comes to dismantling, there are certain things you'll be able to do with chairs and other things like that, but when it comes to the technology, we're going to have to do that because we need to be able to unpack it
At
in
the other
next
end.
event.
Yeah. Thank you, though. If there's anything, I'll let you know. Anything that we need help with.
Yeah,
Thank you to everyone.
from now on, after... So here is the only time we're not running an event every weekend. Next weekend, we're not running an event. But after that, it's almost every weekend. So it's...
For the next 3 months,
For the next 3 months, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think it's 14 events, 39 days or something of actual time when we're talking to people.
Formally. Well, I'm sure we'll do lots
formally,
of informal
yeah.
talking too. But.
And we've got to pace ourselves over the next 4 months. We won't be home in Australia until middle of November. And from here we go to Portugal, then we go to England, then we go to Ireland, then we go to Canada, and then 2 places in the US, and then home.
Yeah, should be good.
Yeah.
Should be really good.
So those people we've already seen, including the people from home, wanted to say, even though they have not met you, they love the idea that you're here. And many of them actually contributed. In fact, without their contributions, we wouldn't have been able to be here because we didn't receive enough contributions for the trip, except by the additions that came from people in Australia. Yeah. So you actually have also many of them to thank for us being here.
And a lot of them asked me to send their love to you, and people all over the world, actually. People we're yet to go to, when we started the trip, wrote to me and said, please share our love with everyone that you meet. So
there's people interested in God's truth all around the world. The issue really is that there's there's only small groups in each country at this stage. And so many of you know what it's like being the only ones interested, I suppose, in God's truth. And it is tricky, isn't it? Because there's so many pressures on you. As soon as they hear, you're listening to a guy who's claiming he's Jesus, there's so many pressures on you to think that it's a cult and all these things. And of course, Mary and I don't run a cult.
Imagine the effort it would be.
Way too much effort for us to run a cult.
No, we wouldn't want to.
Our interest is just sharing God's truth with you and letting you decide what you want to do with that.
Yeah. And it's so important that each of us forms our own personal relationship with God. You know, we're really just here to share the truth about God, but you're not going to get to God through us. It's really important that you establish who God is through your own connection with God. And
so that's what we want to share with you, primarily how to do that. And it's something we have thousands of years experience with. So it's easy for us to answer most of your questions in that regard, because there's not a lot of questions we haven't heard. Most people have asked them at some time prior to your thinking of them, is what we found.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask them.
That's right.
Because it's good, always good.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think there's anything else we need to mention.
No, let's get this show on the road.
Just get the show on the road. Yeah, all right.
I think that's all.
All right. Mary and I are just going to swap places. Can everyone see the whiteboard okay? Yep. All right. In Brussels, when I began the conversation with everyone there, we started talking about whether God exists or not. And because we've already had sort of that discussion, we don't want to have that discussion with you. So I'm just going to make a blanket statement. God exists. If you don't agree with that, then you're probably in the wrong room. Now, the fact that God exists means that God is real. And that this is an interesting thing to bear in mind in your in your analysis of life. And the question I've got for many of you is, God is real. So what does that mean to you? You see, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have lives that we're involved in things every day, we're doing things every day, we're having relationships with people, having learning processes ourselves. But how often do we contemplate that if God exists and God is real, what does that mean for me in my future? And what does it even mean for me right now, if God exists and God is real? It's an interesting thing to contemplate. And if God exists and God is real, the next and probably the even bigger question becomes, what is God's personality and nature? You know, how does God feel? What does God think? What does God, how does God express her personality? What is her personality? What qualities does God have? And why are those qualities important to me? If you think about it from a logical perspective, let's say at the moment humans don't really understand, do they, how big the universe is. They know that it seems to be expanding. They know that because they can measure that there's some things travelling farther away from us over time, and they measure it by what's called redshift and blueshift with regard to light to see how fast those things are travelling, whether they're travelling towards us or away from us. And in the process, they can see that it appears that the universe is expanding, which would tend to indicate that the physical universe in which we live has sort of like an outer boundary of some kind. And if the universe has an outer boundary and all the galaxies and everything is it is slowly expanding, then that means the universe is in a state of constant change, doesn't it? So things are travelling at hundreds of millions speed of light per second. Things are travelling apart, and it appears like that might be a never-ending thing. But of course, there's so much that humans are yet to know about the universe itself, and so the main thing we can assume from that is, well, it appears like the universe might have an edge. We don't really know. It might have a limit. We don't really know that either. But the fact that it's all expanding means it must be going somewhere, and therefore expanding into greater usage of space. But that's the physical universe. And 95% of all matter is actually existing in the invisible universe. So that they're predicted through seeing the effects of things on other things, that there's a whole lot of matter that exists in the universe. And they are right in that regard. A whole lot of matter exists in the universe that is unseen. Now, that matter is in different dimensions, different dimensional spaces. So there's this physical universe, but there's also you could say a universe which is also physical, but it's in other dimensional spaces, in areas we can't see with our eyes. We can't measure it using the visible spectrum of light. And also it takes up a similar space to the physical universe. This is something most people don't understand, mostly because they've never seen it. And, the advantage of coming from the spirit world like Mary and I have is that we've seen it, so it's easy for us to recognise it as real. So there's a physical universe, and then there's these other aspects of the universe. Let's just call them, there's unseen parts of the universe that we can't see, that are still a part of the universe. Now, if one of God's qualities is that God is the creator, then it means that God created that. And God not only created it, but also created the laws that govern it, which are more important, if you think about it, than the universe itself. Because without laws governing the universe would be absolutely chaotic. And yet it's not. It's governed by laws. All of the universe is governed by laws. So right down to the smallest particle measured at this stage by man, and there's actually smaller particles than what are measured, right up to the biggest masses in the universe that humans can measure, which are galaxies for the most part, all of them are covered by laws, and there's a seemingly infinite number of laws, and every time humans discover new laws, they can apply those new laws mathematically to the things that they have not yet discovered, and they discover more as a part of that process. And to be honest with you, that's how you ended up with your mobile phone. Your mobile phone is a process of humans discovering laws that govern the physical universe, and also laws that govern a part of the universe that is unseen, because your signal from your mobile phone goes via links that you cannot see. There's a device on the other end you can see, but the transmission of the signals you can't see. They happen near speed of light, and you can't see any of that. But at some point, someone had to discover the laws that govern that in order for you to be able to use a mobile phone. So the reality is there are many laws that humans are using right now that they can't see, but they know exist because they're using them, right? So we're discovering that this physical world is governed by law. Right? So you could say, if you wanted to summarise the types of law, we can do that in a minute, but you can see that the physical universe that you're currently sitting in is definitely controlled by laws. And that would also indicate that's one of the evidences, in fact, that a creator exists. Because a chaotic universe wouldn't create a whole heap of laws by itself spontaneously. A question, thank you. So just keep your hand up so people know. Yeah, that's it.
Why is the universe so big if, like, humans only live in such a small space?
Do they?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. See, that's right. You can see, for any of us, no matter what our stage of development, there's things we don't know, isn't there? So that's a very important thing to remember, isn't it? That there's a whole heap of things we don't know. Now, there's things that Mary and I know that you don't know, but there's also things you don't know that other people don't know. And then there's things that Mary and I don't know as well. You know, of course. And of course, God knows everything. So this is something that should help us with something that I'd like to talk about a lot more with you today, which is the word perspective. So the question was, why is there such a big universe when it seems there's such a small amount of people? But we don't know there's a small amount of people. We also don't know that there might not be other Earths, and in fact there are other Earths. Like I've met the people from the other Earths. Well, when I say met the people, I've met usually 2 people from the other Earths only at this stage. But that was when I was in the soul union state with Mary. We met people who were in the same state with from other Earths, 6 other Earths at this stage. And we met them and conversed with them, and they told us their experience and we told them ours, so that we know for certain those Earths exist. But that's only 6 in entire, huge space. What's God's purpose for the rest of that space? Is a good question, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it is something that's worth considering for your future, is why would God create such a huge expanse only to have most of it empty? Is that God's intention? So obviously it wouldn't make sense that it's God's intention, would it? So obviously there's got to be something going on there as well. Yeah? For you. Just there.
Is it linked to what some people are planning to do with Mars, to colonize Mars?
Well, I suppose I shouldn't get onto the subject of colonising Mars. But
If Cornelius was here, another one of the 14, he has a lot to say about colonising Mars. He's not impressed.
all the 14 have a lot to say about colonising Mars, and we're not that hot on the idea. But if you think about a place like Mars and compare it to Earth, what do you think? What do you feel? Obviously, Earth has been custom-made for human life. Mars, not custom-made for human life. Right? Now, while it is true that we have the capacity and the ability to develop technology to go to places, we also have to start considering the expense on Earth as to what that's causing. So every rocket we fly into space, causes pollution, degradation to this environment, that takes resources from this environment. We've got to start considering the balance of these things. But God didn't stop you or want to stop you from exploring the universe. But there are far better ways than creating a rocket. Yeah? When you're a spirit, you can just go to the places. And go to the new place and go to the new place, and you don't need a suit, a space suit, because your spirit body is immune to the effects of the spirit. The physical body has limitations and the spirit body doesn't have them. So your spirit body is able to also go large distances without a spacecraft. So, most of my exploration of the universe, which I've done a lot of, has been primarily done in my own body as a spirit. And trust me, it's a lot better and more comfortable than wearing a spacesuit. Right? So I would recommend that you don't wear a spacesuit and you instead use your spirit body to examine those things. But that also gets us down to the question is, what is the real you, which we also need to discuss today, right, as well. If we go next to you, Mike.
Is the universe always expanding because more souls incarnate?
Well, that's another good question. More souls are incarnating, so obviously there is going to need to be somewhere to place them. But if you look at the size of the universe compared to how many souls have incarnated at this point, there's a great discrepancy, isn't there, between how much is in the universe and how there are more planets and stars than there are people. So that is indicative of the fact that there must be further things that God has planned for you. And that's an interesting concept to follow as well. What does God have planned for you? What's the fastest way to find that out? Ask Him. Yeah. And so this is what I want to focus your attention on in our weekend is I want to focus your attention on your relationship with God rather than perhaps these other questions, because in the process of this relationship with God, most of these other questions will be answered. And so it's sort of like the old adage, do you give a man a fish to eat or do you teach him how to fish? Right? So what we're trying to do here is not give you small bites of answers of things that we have discovered, but rather encourage your desire to discover and also encourage you to find out how you find the answers, for yourself. Because trust me, it's a lot more interesting finding the answer for yourself than it is having someone tell you the answer. And I don't know, it's like, let's take sex for example. If I tell you about sex,
everyone might go home.
Is that as good as having it? For those of you who've had it, probably any words I use to express or talk to you about it compared to having it, the words don't really do the action justice, do they? And this is the same with the majority of your life, actually. Until you have the personal experience, you're not really going to understand the joy and the happiness and also lots of other feelings that come from going through the actual experience. So what I would like to encourage you guys to do is to understand how to have the experience rather than just talk about the experience. And you can see why. Obviously, once the experience becomes personal for you, then of course your faith increases, your desire increases, your happiness and joy increases. But if the experience is never personal, we're just talking words, aren't we? Up until that point. We're talking ideas or concepts which are fascinating in themselves, but they're not anywhere near as enjoyable as having the experience. Right? So this is why we need to say a lot of words. You know, for the next 15 hours you're in our company probably, and we're going to say a lot of words. But what we want to do is try to help you to have the experience. That's our goal. Yeah? So getting back to this idea, the Creator obviously created this, let's call it the universe, and obviously in particular there's this important things called laws that govern the universe, which are in a way an expression of the Creator's desire. So the laws tell us something about God as well. They tell us something about God's personality and God's nature. And that's interesting to contemplate. But also there's this thing of perspective we need to gain individually. What I mean by perspective is, how big is God compared to you? Get some perspective. See, the first human couple, a man and a man, they decided at some point that they could be equal to God. They lost all sense of perspective. There were reasons why they felt themselves to be a beautiful created being, of which God feels you are, of course, because he made you, and of course he thinks that he made you beautiful. But they then began to believe that they didn't need God to know or understand the universe, and that they could be gods themselves. And the biggest emotional injury that we have on this planet is our own feeling that we are our own lawmaker. That we have the right to govern ourselves. That's the biggest emotional injury that we have. So let's go, it's a good question, and to Alex on this side.
So my question is, the first human couple, they made a mistake.
Yes.
And
which probably we would have made if we were in the same circumstance.
Okay.
Yep.
My question is, why didn't they realize and went back to God? Because if I make a mistake, after that I realize I made a mistake.
Yep.
And probably I have more errors than they had.
The problem with making a mistake, and this is something you're going to find in your own life, the problem with making a mistake is that now a new condition in your soul exists because of the mistake. And that new condition then encourages you to make more mistakes. And what happens generally is a person doesn't see the trajectory of their mistakes until a long time down the future, when they can measure the results of those mistakes. So a man and a man make a mistake. So let's say they're here and they make a mistake. That puts them in this trajectory. It puts them in a direction towards making more mistakes. So they make another mistake and another mistake. But at this stage, they're not self-aware enough to measure the results of their own mistakes. It's only when the mistakes become more and more painful that the results start to get measured.
But then often...
But by the time the results are being measured, there's so many mistakes that have been made that the average person doesn't want to unmake them. They just want to continue trying something different. And if you think about your own life, this happens to many of you in your own life. You make a mistake and you go, oh, this isn't working out so well, I'll just do another thing. Without a lot of contemplation or thought necessarily, and you do the next thing. And sometimes it's a knee-jerk reaction to the previous thing you did, but it's just as much sin as the previous thing. So an example of that is like, let's say I'm a woman and I have a relationship with a man and he's very dominating, he's very controlling. So that was a mistake. So what do? I say, I don't want to be with a dominating man anymore. What do I want to have instead? I want to dominate the man. So I go and now find a man who I can dominate, which is another mistake. And see, I haven't measured the full reasons or consequences or causes even as to why I made the previous mistake. And so that then causes me to make a further mistake and a further mistake. And this is the trouble with sin, is once you start on its road, frequently it just causes you to sin more. And very few people have the internal set of awareness or moral character where they'll stop that process. Now, a modern man weren't, most of you might think that they were built with a moral compass, but actually they were in the same state as you were when you were a baby, and there was no moral compass yet. It had to be developed. But in the process of making choices and decisions, their moral compass slowly got distorted, right? And so by the time they became aware of the problems they had created, there was also no longer a desire to fix it with God. They wanted to fix it themselves. They wanted to correct it themselves.
And could we also add to that? Very often as humans, we're very bad at measuring how we got, what was the mistake.
We got there.
We often say, oh, it wasn't the true, we don't put the effects with the actual cause. We make a series of mistakes and then we blame something else for the effects, you know. Yep. We don't see, oh, it was that decision back there. We blame others or we blame this other thing that we did. And we're very bad at putting causes with effects when we're sinning.
Yeah. So I've talked to our modern man, and their answer to that question, which is the exact question I asked them, was that they had gone on for many hundreds of years before they actually realised how big a mistake they made. And the result of that, of course, was that now they didn't know either how to undo the mistakes either. They didn't have... They had blocked off the potentiality of a relationship with God themselves, and in the process of doing that, there was no... They had to work it all out how to undo their own mistakes now. Now, as you well know, for many of you, you know, having no help to deal with your mistakes is tough, isn't it? Like you don't know whether you should do this thing or that thing, or should you make, what decision should you make? And that's the exact same feeling they had. Like, how do I now undo these mistakes? You know, they could see, by that stage, they could see that their relationship with God had been broken, but also they didn't know how to fix it, and they didn't know what to do to fix it. So they just continued in their way until they passed. And then, of course, eventually they made their way to the sixth sphere of the spirit world, which is where they were when I first met them. And then, obviously, they heard about God's truth, and then they progressed from that point onwards. But the key for many of us is to realise that if we were in the same circumstance, we possibly would have done the same things, you know. And if we're honest with ourselves, many of us like to be or like to believe we're our own God, our own lawmaker, and as a result of that, we have that same feeling that they had. I want to make my own laws. I want to ignore the potentiality of there being a God who made laws that would govern my life. But let's just go to Alex for a moment, because you had...
Hi. Since we're talking about size and perspective,
yeah.
isn't it that the more love, the bigger the things are? And was it in times of Ammon and the man that everything was bigger, themselves and the trees and everything?
It is true that their souls and their physical form was obviously better than ours are today, and also their souls were in a more pristine state. And they were the only beings that were, the only humans that weren't born, right? So they were given a fully formed body, and so their birth, if you like, was like an unincarnated soul, like a child, put into a fully formed body. So they're the only people who've ever had that experience on this earth, a child being put into a fully formed body. But emotionally and intellectually and mentally and spiritually and sexually, they were undeveloped. They had to learn how to develop those things. So even though they had a perfect body that was created for them, and even though the earth by this stage had been well prepared for their arrival, so there was food everywhere, animals everywhere, creatures everywhere, in the place where they arrived, which was near where the Middle East is today, instead of it being like it is today, which is almost like a barren desert, it was a rainforest. It was beautiful. And we're talking 150,000 years or more ago on this earth. So there's been a lot of things happen to the earth since then. And in that place, so they arrived in this beautiful place, they arrived in a beautiful condition, but with no experience. And that's the thing you've got to bear in mind. There's no experience. There's no experience. They had to gather experience. And so they were like babies in an adult body. They had to learn that they could eat. They had to learn they could drink. They had to learn everything, just like you would if you were a baby having to learn everything. But they had an adult body to do that in. Does that make sense to you? Now, they're the only people on earth who've ever experienced that. So talking to them is very interesting because you find out a lot of things about their experience and what their experience is like. But what I'm trying to do is hone you back into this thing of that there is laws and perspective. And why did I raise Ammon and a man? Well, because Ammon and a man were placed into this universe when they were unconsciously created. In other words, there was a time before they incarnated on earth, they were unconscious of themselves. They didn't know themselves. They had no experience. They weren't self-aware. And then as soon as they were placed on the earth, they became self-aware. And their self-awareness gradually grew as time went on. And of course, they then made choices and decisions. But in the process, they lost perspective. They lost perspective because they started to believe that they could be their own God. So they lost perspective. The perspective being that the Creator created this universe and the Creator created the laws that govern it, and therefore the Creator was much, much larger than anything you could even imagine because he's larger than the universe itself. He has the power to control the universe itself. That's how much power God has. Now, when you're in this throes of development as a child, you don't understand these things. And you don't even, and many people on earth, even as adults who are 70, 80 years old, don't understand those things. They still feel that their power is the biggest power on earth. Many of us humans believe we are the biggest power on earth. You know, often from an evolutionary point of view, it's called we're the dominant predator, the apex predator. Yeah. But God doesn't enter that equation, does it? And not that God's an apex predator, but God is far greater than anything as human we could ever imagine. And far greater, and all of God's qualities I've learned are infinite in their nature. And that's something even as a human, on the entire time that I've progressed, I still struggle to understand, even though I've received a lot of God's love, still struggle to understand what that really means about God. Like, how is God this infinite creature? It's such an amazing concept. I know it to be true because that's been my experience of him. Right? But even though I know it to be true, my mind struggles with the idea of it. And this is why your mind's no good. We talked about that last week in Brussels, how useless your mind is. Your mind was created by God for a purpose, to help you out, but not to become the dominant creature of your life, the dominant governing force of your life. Your mind has severe limitations. And this is something that I learnt in the first century, and I know to be a fact. Now, most people on earth don't believe that. Most people on earth believe the mind is the thing to develop. The mind is the thing to grow. The mind is the thing that causes you to make decisions. But it's not actually true, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But let's get back to this, because I want to just develop the theme a bit of the perspective. If you have questions about the perspective or the... microphone.
How accurate are
microphone, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How accurate are the Ten Commandments then to get us back on track? We will be talking about what's called morals. And you can define morals as God's definition of what is true and false, or God's definition of what is right or wrong. And God did create a set of laws that determine right and wrong. And so we need to discuss some of those. Now, some of the ones included in the Ten Commandments have no bearing on God's thoughts, but some of them do have some bearing. So one of those was the law not to murder anybody, of course. So that was because it would impinge upon other people's free will. So that certainly is a moral law from the Ten Commandments that is right, that God has defined as right. But there are other ones like honour your father and your mother, which is another law from the Ten Commandments, which God doesn't agree with. The reason why God doesn't agree with that is because what happens when the honour of your mother and father precludes your honour of God's law? In other words, what happens when your mum and dad don't believe in the law? Should you still honour them? But there's a difference between honouring them and in terms of honouring them as a person, in terms of saying they have the right to make their own decisions and make their own laws, and honouring what they tell you to do. Because if they tell you to break the law, you can't honour that, right? And unless you want to get a penalty of that. So there are obviously man-made laws, or you could say man-made constructs or ideas, which we think are law, but have no bearing on what God treats as law, right? So it's very important to understand that when we talk about law here, we're talking about the laws God established, not the laws of humans. So, of course, we want to discover what they are, because the more we can live in harmony with them, the happier we'll be, obviously. But we also mustn't assume that just because humans have made a whole series of laws, that it means that they are justified in doing so, or that those laws are in agreement with God's. Because obviously there's going to be laws that humans make that are in complete disagreement with God's. Yeah? So we can talk about that a little later, but I want to bring you back to this idea of perspective still. If I lose perspective, if I lose the perspective that I am the created ant, or human, but really I'm not much bigger than an ant. When you look at the universal aspect, how big the universe is, I'm like less than an ant, really. That's how I'm small in comparison to the universe. Of course, when I say I'm just using my physical body here, because actually your soul can be much bigger than your physical body is, depending on its development. But if we're just looking at physical form, I, as a human, am much, much smaller than the universe around me, and I need to have perspective. I need to have perspective. If God is infinite and God created this huge, huge thing that I can't even grasp intellectually how large it is, and I live in it, then I must be less than God is. Right? And this is a very important thing to remember for your life. It's when you try to make yourself equal to God or greater to God that you're going to run into most of your problems. And one of the ways we, as humans, make ourselves equal to God or greater than God is by creating our own law and living by that. This is one of the ways in which we dishonour God, actually, and in the process cause a lot of trouble for ourselves. And that's because we've lost perspective. You could say losing perspective is arrogance. Can you see that? It's becoming arrogant. And many of us don't realise it, but we are extremely arrogant when it comes to our relationship with God. As Nico pointed out earlier, we're even able to believe that when we have an argument with God, we're going to win. Like, as if that is ever going to happen. It's never going to happen. You set yourself up in opposition to the universal creator. Do you think it's going to work out well? Now, most of us think it is going to work out well. That's how arrogant we've become. We think it's going to work out well. Yep, Bjorn?
Can it also be like fear of the greatness?
Well, fear does play a part in our desire to ignore law, that is true. But how much of it is fear versus anger? Like angry that we've got to, meet criteria, law, in order to have a happy life. Like, how much of it is that we want to be like what we view as free, but actually harming others in the process of our freedom, So you've got to start. A lot of times we can explain things away by saying, I was just afraid. But a lot of times when I see a person doing that, they're really just angry. And they call it afraid. Because why would I call something fear when it's actually anger? Why would I do that? What's my reason for doing that, do you think? Franz, you want to?
So to mask or justify it?
Yes, to mask my true desire. Why would I want to mask my true desire? Because I don't want to change it. Like if I have to honestly admit to myself that the main reason why I'm in this argument with God is because I'm angry rather than afraid. What I've learnt is that most people don't argue with people they're afraid of. Isn't that true? Like, if you think about the people you're truly afraid of, do you ever go up to them and start a Barney with them? Most of the time not, right? You don't. You go, that person you're afraid of, you go, I see them down the street, I go, walk in the other direction. That's how I usually act in my fear. But when I'm in my anger, now I'll feel like I've got to say something to that person. Up I go. You see the difference? And so when we're in this sort of state with God, where we're having an argument with God, we're really in a state of anger, not in a state of fear. Right? And most of us don't realise why we're in a state of anger. That's true. There's a lot of reasons why we might be in a state of anger. But anger is a lot about power, isn't it? Gaining power over something. So most of us want to feel that we want to gain power over our life. We want to gain power over our emotion. We want to also gain power over God. We want to get to the stage where we think that what we do is more important than what God thinks we should do. So in a lot of ways we're in an argument And not because we're afraid. We're in an argument because we're angry. For whatever reason, we're angry. Oftentimes related to our childhood, which we can talk about tomorrow. Yeah. If we go next to Nico there. Yeah. What was your name?
Tim.
Tim.
When we realize that we don't want to do something, how do we go then further from there? Like we realize, yeah, fuck, and now? Like, what do we do then?
Well, let's talk about that tomorrow, because that's one of the things I want to talk about. Remember, we said in our introduction today that I wanted to talk to you about why I want to fight the law, what's driving me to fight the law, and then how do I reverse that decision to fight the law versus like learn the law and want to live by the law. You know, that they are good questions we need to answer, but we'll try to focus on those questions tomorrow. Yep. Nico, and then down here, what was your name? Jörg. Just here. Yeah. So Nico.
I've made breakthroughs by telling God exactly that, about control, about everything.
Yeah.
And
but has it changed your life, Nico? Like, do you find yourself receiving more of God's love, or do you still find yourself in the fight?
If I choose every day to abide by His laws and to be humble, I receive a lot of love.
Yes.
If I want to wear my facade, say, okay, today I'm not in the mood.
Not in the mood.
Yeah, the law works. The law will remind me that I break the law. And when I fall down, like what you painted in the board, the law will become stronger and stronger because it's a force.
Of course.
It's action and reaction. But
my question for you, though, is what is going to change in you where you no longer decide, I'm not in the mood? Where you no longer decide, I don't, you never finish up deciding, I don't want to do it.
You're always in the
mood. You
mood.
always want to do it.
Yeah.
So,
you love doing it.
There needs to be a time in your life, doesn't there, where you actually give up all resistance, knowing that all resistance to the law is futile, rather than going, I will live happily with this law or that law, but those other laws over there I'm going to not live by. A person who does that, you could say, has not yet grown in love enough to understand, and in love of self enough to understand that any law they break is going to cause regret, cause sadness.
I already know that, and I'm prepared to feel the sadness.
This is why I'm saying why. Why would a person choose to do that? See, that's something we need to discuss tomorrow, isn't it? Why would we know that something is good for us, and yet we still don't do it? Isn't that the definition of being crazy? Right?
No, it's the definition of being sad.
Well, doesn't holding on to sadness make you crazy?
From God's perspective.
Of course it doesn't. It makes you make decisions that are not sound. Do you understand? And therefore motivated by a touch of madness. Yeah? But we'll talk about some of that
I understood your perspective, what you're saying.
It's not my perspective.
Okay, sorry.
It's God's, yeah.
Are we,
All right.
are we created on the image of God? In what way?
Yeah, we need to talk about that a little bit too, don't we? So let's look at God's highest creation, which, believe it or not, is not the universe. It's your soul. So let's look at the highest creation, the human soul. Now that human soul was made in the image of God, in the sense that God is soul, right? But not in the. It doesn't have the same capabilities, characteristics as God's soul, in the sense of that it's infinite in its nature. God created us, human souls, to be finite in nature. So God's soul infinite, ours finite. God's love infinite, our love finite. God's kindness, compassion, infinite. My kindness, finite. God's power, infinite. My power, finite. Like limited. Now, the only way I can grow from becoming a finite and limited being to become more infinite is by receiving a part of God's nature. Receiving things from God. Love being the very first thing that I would need to receive. So God has designed our soul to be finite, but He's given it the capacity to grow beyond the finite capacity He created it with. But only if we choose to receive some of His infinite qualities. So the human soul, a finite creation, and without God would remain so. It would remain finite. Right? But it's being created in God's image in the sense that it has many of the qualities and attributes of God's soul. And the reason why God created it like that is so that God could share some of those infinite attributes with the finite human, the limited human. And that means that we don't really know what the human soul is capable of once it starts receiving God's love. And there's, even to this day, nobody really knows how much of that love can be received and what that means for our future. Right? Of course, every celestial spirit in the spirit world knows how happy it is and how blissful it makes you and how much joy you experience, but they don't understand how much bigger they can get. They can only do that through experience. So a part of the experience of the human soul, the potential experience, is receiving gifts from the Creator. From the Creator's soul. And of course I haven't drawn these in perspective, have I? Yeah, because obviously Creator's soul infinite and our finite soul created with finite capacity. And God created our soul with the ability to receive gifts from the infinite soul of God. And this enables then the finite soul to make changes that are beyond its natural position. So you could say this finite soul, we could call it the perfect natural man. So that's the label we gave it. I was the first person to give that label to it. And so that label I gave it was the perfect natural man. And what I mean by natural right? What I mean by natural is that that's the limitation that we have if we remain that creature. We will never go beyond that. By the way, it's an amazing place to be that. So on earth, nobody experiences that because there's so much sin imbibed on earth that has degraded the natural man or woman into no longer being perfect. And now, because we've got so much sin, in other words, we've broken so many laws, and the consequences of those breaking of the laws is being felt by us, so that now means the soul is feeling the consequence of the breaking of those laws, and so we're no longer perfect, we're now quite degraded. Right? So the trouble with our perspective here on earth is we're meeting new people. You know, we met all of you today. We meet new people and we think we're all normal, you know. We're sort of... But we are degraded humans. You know, we're no longer the perfect natural man, right? That got... You know, there's a whole series of things that happen to us, some of which we'll talk about tomorrow, that happen to us that cause us to no longer be that creature. But the trouble is we're meeting each other and seeing ourselves in the mirror thinking we're pretty good, but actually we're just this degraded natural man, right? So we don't even have perspective enough to know that we're degraded.
Does that make sense? For most of us, we don't even have that perspective. But in answer to your question, this perfect natural man, woman, it's actually a soul which is two halves of one person, two halves. Your one half, your soulmate, the other half, makes the human soul. It's the soul that has been created in the image of God. It has only this as its future if God is not, if the soul isn't receiving qualities from God. That's its only future. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Jay. What is the God's wisdom in incarnating the souls in that state? I mean, it's like we're incarnating souls into the nut house, basically.
A nut house created by
us. But I have a problem with that because is it individual, like each soul is sort of individual, how is it itself in unconscious state responsible for the collective?
So now that question is motivated by an emotion.
It is.
Yeah. And the emotion is, I feel it's unjust.
I'm angry.
Yeah.
Unjust, yeah.
I feel it's unjust. Now, you see, the difference between you and I is I don't feel it's unjust. And God doesn't feel it's unjust either. So why do you feel it's unjust is a part of the question that needs to be answered, doesn't it? Now, so what you're basically saying is that because this poor human soul is coming to this crappy place, this terrible place, and let's feel sorry for that soul. Right? Now, we must first understand the purpose of God creating the process of incarnation, what the reason for incarnation is. You see, for you to become a self-aware being, of which this soul has the potential of doing, you have to have an experience. Now, what God did was God created a perfect world, a perfect earth, everything perfect, and two perfect humans, and put them there. And then he incarnated, he had the process, he actually involved himself in the incarnation of their souls to those two bodies that he created. He created two bodies, a spirit one for them and a physical one. He formed the first human couple, he formed directly, and he created the spirit body of each of them and the physical body of each of them. And the spirit body and the physical body were created absolutely perfect. No flaws. Right? So this first human couple came and they had no flaws, absolutely perfect. But notice that it didn't stop them from sinning. So that's an important thing to remember. Just because they had a perfect beginning, it didn't stop them from choosing sin.
So is it inevitable then? So if you create a creature with free will, is it inevitable for something like that to happen?
Yes.
So you have to then make it that way, and that's it. That's most economical. And
well, yeah, let's firstly look at the process. Is it inevitable? Yes, is the answer to that. Yes. Because sooner or later, that person, through the exercise of their will, is going to start to experiment with breaking laws. Right? Now, if they are sensitive emotionally, and they're sensitive sexually, and they're sensitive physically, and they're sensitive spiritually, they would recognise they're breaking law. But if they're in a state where they're quite undeveloped, which is what a man and a man were, because remember when they first came, they were like babies in adult body, right? So when they're in a state of being quite undeveloped, they're going to break law and maybe not be able to measure it. Right? Not instantly. Right? In the Bible, there is this quote in Genesis that once they sinned, they were barred from paradise, and it makes it seem like it was an instant reaction, right?
But it wasn't. It was a gradual reaction, like all of our sins are on earth. There was a gradual reaction to our soul sinning. And in the process of a soul sinning, there's a gradual response around that occurs over time. And it requires a very sensitive and self-aware person to recognise that's actually occurring. So the first answer to the question, if we need to go right back to a modern man and say, yes, it was inevitable that one of humanity eventually would decide to sin and also decide to experiment with breaking the law. Right? That was inevitable. God knew it was inevitable. Right? So God put everything on there perfectly to give us the best possible chance of it not happening. But God also knew that it would most probably happen. And in fact, God created a whole series of laws to correct it happening as well. So God's laws, many of them are about the correction of the human soul to bring it back to a state of perfection. But also God knows that in the exercise of your will, in other words, your choice and decision, has to be yours, not his. He can't force you. If he gives you free will, he can't ever at any point force you to make a different decision. The decision has to be your decision, right? So he also knew that even though he's created all these laws to redeem humans, it had to be your decision for your own redemption, right? And he also knew that the decision for your redemption was going to be at a different time and space, made to my decision for my redemption. I had to make my own decision. You have to make yours. Yeah? Just want to grab a drink of water. Should we 5-minute toilet break? Yep. I want to continue with your question though.